Hello, my name is Davinah Simmons, and I am really excited to talk to you today about creating expansive presentations. A little bit about me: I have a background in higher education and facilitation. I've been doing that for the last 10 years, and was also a full spectrum doula for 4 years in Seattle, Washington, also known as Duwamish Territory. And now I'm the co-executive director of the Maternal Coalition, which is an organization based in South Seattle that exists to prevent birth trauma, but also to educate care providers in the Washington State area on how to also prevent it from their end. I'm really excited to talk to you about expansive presentations. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I think we all can afford to learn more about how to present effectively, but also to make sure that our presentations are respectful, relevant, and honoring of the identities that people hold, especially when we're talking about the perinatal and reproductive space. I have dual screens, so I may be looking one way or another way, and I just wanted to name that in advance. So, presentations and their impact. As a presenter, we make deeper connections with our consumers when we're imagining a world that is more vast than the one we currently occupy. So, when we're not talking about just black and white, when we're talking about room for the gray areas, when we're talking about ambiguity, when we're talking about nuances, and specifically, I'm going to get into this a little bit more in this presentation, but when we're talking about intersectionality, when we start to speak and think and live expansively, to honor the lives of people that you may never meet or serve, but still acknowledging that they exist, we make more room for each other, and we build trust and are received well by those who are listening to us. And what I'm trying to really hit home here is that when your presentation involves everyone, when your presentation acknowledges the many lived existences, the many lived experiences, people receive you in a deeper way. The people you're talking to, they're awakened by the fact that you're not excluding, because oftentimes when we see presentations that begin to exclude and don't acknowledge or speak on a binary, you lose people. And so our goal here is to help you stay connected to your audience, stay connected to the folks you're presenting to, but also to continue to remember that we're learning. So presentations that are about client care and birth work and direct service really show us where our blind spots are. And my question to you is, when you are developing your presentation, are you going to be honoring the social determinants of health that exist in client care, thus also in your presentation? So have you done your research about who you're presenting to and who they give care to? What information should you be asking in advance to be sure that your presentation is relevant but is also thoughtful? And when I say thoughtful, I mean, who are we nodding to? Who are we involving in these presentations? Who are we talking about? What communities are you going to be presenting to? And maybe there's a wide, vast plethora, which is even better, because it allows you to imagine and to also work really hard at the complicated nature of what it means to exist in bodies in this day and age. And so that doesn't sound super fun when it's saying, welcome to the struggle, but it does mean that the more you work through this and the more you struggle to make sure that your presentation is inclusive, the better off those who are receiving the information will be, thus the better off their clients will be. So the social determinants of health are various factors that impact the health of individuals and the communities that they exist in. So again, we're going back to intersectionality. So the many facets, and I'll give you some hard examples later, but the health of those people are determined by many interrelated factors that include lifestyle, circumstances, and environment. While some determinants can be influenced, others are more difficult, so if not impossible to control. And so it's really important that we also acknowledge that not every client or not every person that people are serving are going to have the same story or the same access or the same stressors or systemic barriers. And so it's really important that we're acknowledging that something may be cut and dry, but when you add in a social determinant of health, when you add in a certain factor, it is no longer cut and dry. It is complicated. And here are ideas on how to help people navigate around those things or through those things. And so oftentimes when I'm talking to people, I'm talking to them about thinking about systemic barriers that people are facing in advance to help inform conversation. And so it's the same thing with your presentation. When you're talking about a specific thing, maybe you're a nutritionist, maybe you're a midwife, what systemic barriers exist that create barriers to access, and really talking through those, because you're likely going to have people in your audience who are caring for people that live that experience. And it's really important that we not assume, as we have for years and years and years, that care is straightforward, that care isn't nuanced, because we know now that it is, specifically because people are dying, people are not receiving adequate care. So I just wanted to run through the social determinants of health, and then we're going to do a really quick run through of everything else, because I want to keep you engaged and I don't want to lose you. So things to consider when talking about client care, birth work, and direct service in your presentations. Region and environment. Are you speaking about a group of people located in a region only that you are familiar with? Are you considering the barriers and advantages that other areas present? What's available to people in these areas that may not be available to others? What environmental threats or dangers exist there? And how do these things impact decision making in client care? Talking about race and ethnicity. So really thinking about the experience that someone might have because of their race or ethnicity, but also the nuances based on other identities that they hold. So for example, remembering intersectionality here. An African American man is going to experience the world differently than an African American woman. What are the differences there? Gender. Somebody who is LGBT is going to experience the world differently than someone who's straight. Somebody who's LGBT and African American is going to experience the world differently than someone who's LGBT and Latina. It's sort of this common sense notion that different categories of people have different kinds of experience. I highly recommend that you look up Kimberly Crenshaw. They are an incredible scholar and educator, and they came up with the term intersectionality. And I think it's going to be really helpful for you to help frame some of your presentation when you nod to intersectionality, when you really kind of hit that home in your presentation to talk about the fact that nuance exists, and that we're not speaking on a black and white spectrum here. We're not speaking on a binary, because we acknowledge that those things are changing, that those things have never always been set in stone. And so I think just to really help hit this home, that's going to be something really important for you to take responsibility for in your learning and in your presentation. Culture. So I say culture in terms of someone might be per se like black, but they grew up in Latino culture, or someone might be Asian, but they were adopted and grew up in white culture. So when you're discussing working with clients, are you aware of what is respectful in terms of engaging particular groups that have grown up in particular cultures? Are you making assumptions that might create gaps in their care? And so as you're talking and presenting on this, what nods to culture do you need to be specific about? If you're presenting to an audience in the Pacific Northwest, what is the culture of the Pacific Northwest? How does that impact client care? Have you been exposed enough to this to understand the nuances and significant ways of interacting? So basically, have you done your research? If you're presenting to people in a place that you're not familiar with, what research do you need to do? What do you need to be aware of in terms of the different demographics and the different cultural norms that exist? So in a way, honoring your limitations as a presenter and understanding that you need to know your audience and who they serve. Specifically, this one I'm going to really drill into you, gender identity. So when we use gender inclusive language in our presentations, we're not only honoring the lived experiences, but we are acknowledging the work of practitioners who support and care deeply for those clients as well. There is nothing more infuriating than being a doula in a presentation where people are using the terms she and women and pregnant women, and I'll get into that more, but we are moving away from gender being binary. And I urge you not to be left behind in this conversation. I urge you to do more work around this if you're not comfortable or familiar with the terminology yet, because you not acknowledging it doesn't make it not exist. It actually just makes your presentation less important. It makes it less relatable. It makes it less realistic. And I know that may sound really pointed, and it's because it's really important that people catch up. Using the correct pronouns and remembering that in presentation so that it is applicable to all people is critical. Saying things like pregnant people, pregnant folks, birthing people, and choosing not to just use words like woman, she, her, go a long way when you're trying to be relevant and respectful to your audience. There are going to be people in your audience who work very deeply in the trans and queer community, and it is so imperative that the people they serve and support are acknowledged. We are in changing times, and we've been in changing times, And I know that for folks who are really working on this, who feel like I don't want to say the wrong thing, keep messing up, because the more you mess up, the more you get better, but you have to try. And so I want you to be a relevant presenter. I want your presentations to be relevant. I want them to hit home. I want them to be, I want them to hit the nail on the head. And in order for those to do that when talking about client care and really talking about anything nowadays, you need to make sure that your presentations have gender inclusive terms and language in them. If you need more support in that, there are lots of resources available to you in the good old Google and the internet streets. So just really want to make sure that people recognize that if anything is most important, gender identity is going to be one of the most important things when we're talking about direct service and client care. Socioeconomic status is another, making sure that we are understanding that just because someone might have access and wealth, what are the other identities that they hold that might create, again, barriers, that might create less social support, less structural support for them in their life. So again, remembering that not everyone is on the same playing field, on the same level, and that this is another, again, item of intersection in someone's life. Support systems is the next thing. So what is your awareness of someone's family constellation? Do they have more than one partner? Are they co-parenting? Are they single parenting? How does care and decision-making change when there are multiple primary caregivers making decisions together? Or is it a multi-generational household that where opinions are held as equal? So I give you these examples to help you understand when we're talking about client care and you're talking about decision-making with clients and you're talking about supporting people, we have to also remember like what their actual support systems are. And again, what barriers exist that make decision-making more complex for them? What stressors come with not getting enough support? So rounding out your presentation where you might be talking about someone who has access to every single thing that they need and someone who doesn't. And how do we pull that all together to be one solid presentation that gives an informative view of how to support someone walking from one end of the spectrum to another end? And are you assuming that everyone has adequate support? So really removing that assumption and slowing down and really getting to the root of what is important when we're talking about people getting their needs met. Be an expert. You are an expert. You were hired to do this presentation because you are an expert. But remember that your learning does not stop. Communities change. Our world is rapidly changing. Needs are changing. So taking responsibility for knowing those needs in the community, knowing what is shifting in the community, and making sure that you're on top of that. But also remembering that it is okay to not know. It's okay to start somewhere and say, I need to get here with my presentation because right now it feels a little bit limited. You may have worked with the same region or same geographic demographic of people, and wonderful. It's wonderful that you know that group of people, but it's really important for you to widen your scope and look beyond those people that you support. To remember that there are other people out there that need the information that you have, need those pearls of knowledge that you have and pearls of wisdom that you have, but need to also be seen and acknowledged in that process. Need to be spoken about, spoken to, because a lot of those people in communities that we're talking about that don't get mentioned, that don't get acknowledged, they don't have a seat at the table. And so it's time for us to start pulling in more chairs. And by doing this, by making our presentations more expansive, by opening up and widening the views that we have, and doing more research and asking more questions about audience, asking more questions about who that audience is supporting, your presentation can be that much stronger. I really look forward to seeing the magic that you create in your work. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is dav@bornrooted.com. I'm happy to talk more about this with you if you feel like you want to do more work to make your presentations more expansive. But I hope that this video serves and supports you in a way that feels sustainable and also helps you move more to action. Thank you so much.